Mrs. Danvers relaxed her grip upon my arm. She stared out of the window into the fog. "It's the rockets," she said. "There must be a ship gone ashore there in the bay." We listened, staring into the white fog together, and then we heard the sound of footsteps running on the terrace beneath. It was Maxim. He was shouting for Frith as he ran.
"She's ashore all right. They'll never shift her, not with these tides. I'm going to the cove to see if I can do anything."
Mrs. Danvers drew back from the window. Her face was expressionless once more, the cold, white mask that I knew. "We had better go down," she said. "When you see Mr. de Winter, madam, will you tell him it will be quite all right if he wants to bring the men back from the ship? There will be a hot meal ready for them any time." "Yes," I said. "Yes, Mrs. Danvers." I went out on the terrace. The fog was lifting. I went down the steep, twisting path through the woods to the beach below. When I came to the cove, I could see the ship at once, lying about 2 miles offshore with her bows pointed towards the cliffs. I climbed up the path over the cliffs. I did not see Maxim anywhere. Frank was there, talking to one of the coast guards. He saw me at once and waved his hand. I went over to him. "Where's Maxim?"
"He's taken one of the crew into Careth. The fellow lost his head and jumped for it, apparently, when the ship struck."
"When did he go?"
"Well, just before you turned up, about 5 minutes ago."
I did not say anything. He hesitated, and I felt his eyes upon me. I went back inside and sat on the window seat in the library. I was waiting for something to happen, something unforeseen. The horror of my morning and the stranded ship and not eating anything had all combined to give birth to a latent sense of excitement at the back of my mind that I did not understand. It was as though I had entered into a new phase of my life, and nothing would be quite the same again. The girl who had dressed for the fancy dress ball the night before had been left behind. It had all happened a long time ago. Robert came in.
"Mr. de Winter is not back yet, is he, madam?"
"No. Why? Does someone want him?"
"Yes, madam. It's Captain Searle, the harbour master of Careth, on the telephone. He wants to know if he can come up and see Mr. de Winter personally."
"You had better tell him to ring again at 5 o'clock, I said. Robert went out of the room and came back again in a few minutes.
"Captain Searle would like to see you, if it would be convenient, madam. He says the matter is rather urgent. He tried to get Mr. Crawley, but there was no reply."
In less than 1/4 hour, he was shown into the room. "I'm sorry, my husband isn't back yet, Captain Searle."
"Oh, well, madam, the fact is I've got some news for Mr. de Winter, and I hardly know how to break it to him."
"What sort of news, Captain Searle?"
"Well, Mrs. de Winter, it's not very pleasant for me to tell you either. It's hard on him and hard on you that we can't let the past lie quiet. But I don't see how we can under the circumstances. We sent the diver down to inspect the ship's hull, and while he was down there he came across a little sailing boat, lying on her side, quite intact and not broken up at all. It was the little boat belonging to the late Mrs. de Winter."
My first feeling was one of thankfulness that Maxim was not there to hear. This fresh blow coming swiftly upon my masquerade of the night before was ironic and rather horrible. "Is it necessary to tell Mr. de Winter? Couldn't the boat be left there as it is? It's not doing any harm, is it?"
"It would be left, Mrs. de Winter, in the ordinary way, but that wasn't all, Mrs. de Winter. There was a body in there, lying on the cabin floor. It was dissolved, of course, no flesh on it, but it was a body, all right."
I stared at him, bewildered at first, then shocked, then rather sick. She was supposed to be sailing alone. There must have been someone with her then, all the time, and no one ever knew.
"It looks like it."
Who could it have been? Captain Searle shook his head.
"I can't tell any more than you."
The door opened, and Maxim came into the room.
"Hello. I didn't know you were here, Captain Searle. Is anything the matter?"
I could not stand it any longer. I went out of the room like the coward I was and shut the door behind me. I had not even glanced at Maxim's face. I sat on the terrace and remained there for 5 minutes, staring at the green lawns until I heard the sound of a car starting up in the drive. Captain Searle had broken his news to Maxim and had gone. I ran back to the library. I'm so sorry. So terribly, terribly sorry. He did not answer. His hand was icy cold. I kissed the back of it, then the fingers, one by one. I don't want you to bear this alone, I said. I want to share it with you. He took my face between his hands and looked at me. For the first time I saw how thin his face was, how lined and drawn. And there were great shadows beneath his eyes.
It's too late, my darling. Too late. We've lost our little chance of happiness.
No, Maxim, no.
Yes. It's all over now. The thing has happened. Rebecca has won.
I stared at him, my heart beating strangely.
Her shadow was between us all the time. She knew she'd win in the end. They've found her boat.
Yes, I said. I know. And another body. It means there was somebody sailing with Rebecca at the time, and you have to find out who it was. That's it, isn't it, Maxim?
No. No, you don't understand. There was no one with Rebecca. There never was an accident. Rebecca was not drowned at all. I killed her. I shot Rebecca in the cottage in the cove. I carried her body to the cabin and took the boat out that night and sunk it there where they found it today. It's Rebecca who's lying dead there on the cabin floor.
It was very quiet in the library. When people suffer a great shock, like death or the loss of a limb, I believe they don't feel it just at first. I was aware of no feeling at all. What are you going to do?
I don't know. I don't know.
Disjointed pictures flashed, one by one, through my bewildered mind. Maxim, sitting in the car beside me in the south of France.
Something happened nearly a year ago that altered my whole life. I had to begin living all over again.
Maxim's silence. Maxim's moods. The way he never talked about Rebecca. The way he never mentioned her name. Does anyone know? He shook his head.
No one but you and me.
Why didn't you tell me?
I nearly told you once. That day Jasper ran to the cove and you went to the cottage for some string. You were sitting here like this. And then Frith and Robert came in with the tea.
Yes, I remember. Why didn't you tell me? The time we've wasted when we might have been together. All these weeks and days.
You were so aloof, always wandering into the garden with Jasper, going off on your own. You never came to me like this.
How could I come to you when I knew you were thinking about Rebecca? He pulled me close to him and searched my eyes.
What are you talking about? What do you mean?
Whenever you touched me, I thought you were comparing me to Rebecca.
Oh, my God. You thought I loved Rebecca. You thought I killed her loving her. I hated her, I tell you. Our marriage was a farce from the very first. She was vicious, damnable, rotten through and through. We never loved each other, never had one moment of happiness together. Rebecca was incapable of love, of tenderness, of decency.
I sat on the floor, clasping my knees, staring at him.
She was clever, of course.
He said.
Damnably clever. No one would guess, meeting her, that she was not the kindest, most generous, most gifted person in the world. She knew exactly what to say to different people, how to match her mood to theirs. Had she met you, she'd have walked off into the garden with you, arm in arm, calling to Jasper, chatting about flowers, music, painting, whatever she knew to be your particular hobby. And you'd have been taken in like the rest. You'd have sat at her feet and worshipped her.
Up and down he walked. Up and down across the library floor.
When I married her, I was told I was the luckiest man in the world.
He said.
She was so lovely, so accomplished, so amusing. Even Gran, the most difficult person to please in those days, adored her from the first. She's got the three things that matter in a wife, she told me. Breeding, brains, and beauty. And I believed her, or forced myself to believe her. But all the time I had a seed of doubt at the back of my mind. There was something about her eyes.
The jigsaw pieces came together piece by piece. The real Rebecca took shape and form before me, stepping from her shadow world like a living figure from a picture frame. Rebecca slashing at her horse, Rebecca seizing life with her two hands, Rebecca triumphant, leaning down from the minstrel's gallery with a smile on her lips. Once more I saw myself standing on the beach beside poor startled Ben.
You're kind.
He had grinned.
Not like the other one. You won't put me in the asylum, will you?
There was someone who walked through the woods by night. Someone tall and slim. She gave you the feeling of a snake. Maxim was talking, though. Maxim was walking up and down the library floor.
I found her out at once. 5 days after we were married. You remember that time I drove you in the car to the hills above Monte Carlo? I wanted to stand there again, to remember. She sat there, laughing, her black hair blowing in the wind. She told me about herself. Told me things I shall never repeat to a living soul. I knew then what I'd done, what I had married. Beauty, brains, and breeding. Oh, my God!
He broke off abruptly. He went and stood by the window, looking out upon the lawns. He began to laugh. He stood there, laughing. I could not bear it. It made me frightened, ill. I could not stand it. "Maxim!" I cried. "Maxim!" He lit a cigarette and stood there smoking, not saying anything. Then he turned away again and paced up and down the room once more.
I nearly killed her then. It would have been so easy. One false step, one slip. You remember the precipice? I frightened you, didn't I? You thought I was mad. Perhaps I was. Perhaps I am. It doesn't make for sanity, does it? Living with the devil.
I sat there watching him. Up and down, up and down.
She made a bargain with me up there on the side of the precipice. "I'll run your house for you," she told me. "I'll look after your precious Manderley for you. Make it the most famous showplace in all the country, if you like. And people will visit us and envy us and talk about us. And they'll say we're the luckiest, happiest, handsomest couple in all England. What a leg pull, Max," she said. "What a goddamn triumph." She sat there on the hillside, laughing, tearing a flower to bits in her hands.
Maxim threw his cigarette away, a quarter smoked, into the empty grate.
"I didn't kill her,"
he said.
"I watched her. I said nothing. I let her laugh." We got into the car together and drove away. And she knew I would do as she suggested. Come here to Manderley, throw the place open, entertain, have our marriage spoken of as the success of the century. She knew I would sacrifice pride, honour, personal feelings, every damned quality on earth, rather than stand before our little world after a week of marriage and have them know the things about her that she'd just told me. She knew I would never stand in a divorce court and give her away. Have fingers pointing at us, mud flung at us in the newspapers. All the people who belong down here whispering when my name was mentioned. All the trippers from Kerrith trooping to the lodge gates, peering into the grounds and saying, "That's where he lives, in there. That's Manderley. That's the place that belongs to the chap who had the divorce case we read about. Do you remember what the judge said about his wife?"
He came and stood before me. He held out his hands.
"You despise me, don't you?"
he said.
"You can't understand my shame and loathing and disgust."
I did not say anything. I held his hands against my heart. I did not care about his shame. None of the things that he had told me mattered to me at all. I clung to one thing only, and repeated it to myself over and over again. Maxim did not love Rebecca. He had never loved her. Never, never. They had never known one moment's happiness together. Maxim was talking, and I listened to him, but his words meant nothing to me. I did not really care.
I thought about Manderley too much. I put Manderley first before anything else. And it doesn't prosper, that sort of love. They don't preach about it in the churches. Christ said nothing about stones and bricks and walls, the love that a man can bear for his plot of earth, his soil, his little kingdom. It does not come into the Christian creed.
My darling, I said. My Maxim. My love. I laid his hands against my face. I put my lips against them.
Do you understand?
He said.
Do you? Do you?
Yes, I said. My sweet. My love. But I looked away from him so he should not see my face. What did it matter whether I understood him or not? My heart was light like a feather floating in the air. He had never loved Rebecca.
I don't want to look back on those years,
he said slowly.
I don't want even to tell you about them. The shame and the degradation. The lie we lived, she and I. The shabby, sordid farce we played together. Before friends, before relations, even before the servants, before faithful, trusting creatures like old Frith. They all believed in her down here. They all admired her. They never knew how she laughed at them behind their backs, jeered at them, mimicked them. I can remember days when the place was full for some show or other, a garden party, a pageant, and she walked about with a smile like an angel on her face, her arm through mine, giving prizes afterwards to a little troop of children. And then the day afterwards she would be up at dawn driving to London, streaking to that flat of hers by the river like an animal to its hole in the ditch, coming back here at the weekend after 5 unspeakable days. Oh, I kept my side of the bargain all right. I never gave her away. Her blasted taste made Manderley the thing it is today. The gardens, the shrubs, the azaleas. Do you think they existed when my father was alive? God, the place was a wilderness. Lovely, yes. Wild and lonely with a beauty of its own, yes. But crying out for skill and care and the money that he would never give it. That I would not have thought to give it, but for Rebecca. Half the stuff you see in the rooms was never here originally. The drawing room, as it is today, the morning room, that's all Rebecca. Those chairs that Frith points out so proudly to the visitors on the public day, and that panel of tapestry, Rebecca again. Oh, some of the things were here, admittedly, stored away in back rooms. My father knew nothing about furniture or pictures, but the majority was bought by Rebecca. The beauty of Manderley that you see today, the Manderley that people talk about and photograph and paint, is all due to her, to Rebecca.
I did not say anything. I held him close. I wanted him to go on talking like this, that his bitterness might loosen and come away, carrying with it all the pent-up hatred and disgust and muck of the lost years.
And so we lived,
he said.
Month after month, year after year. I accepted everything, because of Manderley. What she did in London didn't touch me, because it didn't touch Manderley. And she was careful those first years. There was never a murmur about her, never a whisper. Then, little by little, she began to grow careless. You know how a man starts drinking. He goes easy at first, just a little at a time, a bad bout every 5 months or so. And then the period grows less and less. Soon it's every month, every fortnight, every few days. There's no margin of safety left, and all his secret cunning goes. It was like that with Rebecca. She began to ask her friends down here. She would have 1 or 2 of them and mix them up at a weekend house party, so that at first I was not quite sure, not quite certain. She would have picnics down at her cottage in the Cove. I came back once, having been away shooting in Scotland, and found her there with 6 of them, people I'd never seen before. I warned her, and she shrugged her shoulders. "What the hell's it got to do with you?" she said. I told her she could see her friends in London, but Manderley was mine. She must stick to that part of the bargain. She smiled. She didn't say anything. Then she started on Frank. Poor, shy, faithful Frank. He came to me one day and said he wanted to leave Manderley and take another job. We argued for 2 hours here in the library. And then I understood. He broke down and told me. She never let him alone, he said. She was always going down to his house, trying to get him to the cottage. Dear, wretched Frank, who had not understood, who had always thought we were the normal, happy married couple we pretended to be. I accused Rebecca of this, and she flared up at once, cursing me, using every filthy word in her particular vocabulary. We had a sickening, loathsome scene. She went up to London after that and stayed there for a month. When she came back, she was quiet at first. I thought she'd learnt her lesson. Bea and Giles came for a weekend, and I realized then what I had sometimes suspected before, that Bea didn't like Rebecca. I believe in her funny, abrupt, downright way she saw through her, guessed something was wrong. It was a tricky, nervy sort of weekend. Giles went out sailing with Rebecca. Bea and I lazed on the lawn. And when they came back, I could tell by Giles's rather hearty, jovial manner, and by a look in Rebecca's eye, that she'd started on him, as she had done on Frank. I saw Bea watching Giles at dinner, who laughed louder than usual, talked a little too much. And all the while Rebecca sitting there at the head of the table, looking like an angel.
They were all fitting into place. The jigsaw pieces. The odd, strange shapes that I'd tried to piece together with my fumbling fingers, and they had never fitted. The silence that I'd always taken for sympathy and regret was silence born of shame and embarrassment. It seemed incredible to me now that I had never understood. I wondered how many people there were in the world who suffered and continued to suffer because they could not break out of their own web of shyness and reserve, and in their blindness and folly built up a great distorted wall in front of them that hid the truth. This was what I had done. I had built up false pictures in my mind and sat before them. I never had the courage to demand the truth. Had I made one step forward out of my own shyness, Maxim would have told me these things 4 months ago, 5 months ago.
Rebecca grew cunning again. Her behaviour was faultless outwardly, but if I happened to be away when she was here at Manderley, I could never be certain what might happen. There had been Frank and Giles. She might get hold of one of the workmen on the estate, someone from Kerrith, anyone, and then the bomb would have to fall. The gossip, the publicity I dreaded.
It seemed to me I stood again by the cottage in the woods, and I heard the drip, drip of the rain upon the roof. I saw the dust on the model ships, the rat holes on the divan. I saw Ben with his poor staring idiot's eyes, and I thought of the dark, steep path through the woods, and how if a woman stood there behind the trees, her evening dress would rustle in the thin night breeze.
She had a cousin,
said Maxim slowly.
A fellow who'd been abroad and was living in England again. He took to coming here, if I was ever away. Frank used to see him. A fellow called Jack Favell.
I know him, I said. He came here the day you went to London.
You saw him too? Why didn't you tell me? I heard it from Frank, who saw his car turn in at the lodge gates.
I did not like to, I said. I thought it would remind you of Rebecca.
Remind me?
Whispered Maxim.
Oh, God, as if I needed reminding.
He stared in front of him, breaking off from his story, and I wondered if he was thinking, as I was, of that flooded cabin beneath the waters in the bay.
She used to have this fellow Favell down to the cottage,
said Maxim.
She would tell the servant she was going to sail and wouldn't come back before the morning. Then she'd spend the night down there with him. Once again, I warned her. I said if I found him there, anywhere on the estate, I'd shoot him. He had a black, filthy record. The very thought of him walking about the woods in Manderley made me mad. I told her I wouldn't stand for it. She shrugged her shoulders. She forgot to blaspheme. And I noticed she was looking paler than usual, nervy, rather haggard. I wondered then what the hell would happen to her when she began to look old, feel old. Things drifted on. Nothing very much happened. Then one day she went up to London and came back again the same day, which she didn't do as a rule. I didn't expect her. I dined that night with Frank at his house. We had a lot of work on at the time.
He was speaking now in short, jerky sentences. I had his hands very tightly between my two hands.
I came back after dinner about 10:30, and I saw her scarf and gloves lying on a chair in the hall. I wondered what the devil she'd come back for. I went into the morning room, but she wasn't there. I guess she'd gone off then down to the cove. And I knew then that I couldn't stand this life of lies and filth and deceit any longer. The thing had got to be settled one way or the other. I thought I'd take a gun and frighten the fellow. Frighten them both. I went down right away to the cottage. The servants never knew I'd come back to the house at all. I slipped out into the garden and through the woods. I saw the light in the cottage window and I went straight in. To my surprise, Rebecca was alone. She was lying on the divan with an ashtray full of cigarette stubs beside her. She looked ill. Queer. I began at once about Favell, and she listened to me without a word. "We've lived this life of degradation long enough, you and I said. "This is the end, do you understand? What you do in London doesn't concern me. You can live with Favell there, or with anyone you like, but not here. Not at Manderley." She said nothing for a moment. She stared at me, and then she smiled. "Suppose it suits me better to live here. What then?" she said. "You know the conditions," I said. "I've kept my part of our dirty, damnable bargain, haven't I? But you've cheated. You think you can treat my house and my home like your own sink in London. I've stood enough, but my God, Rebecca, this is your last chance." I remember she squashed out her cigarette in the tub by the divan, and then she got up and stretched herself, her arms above her head. "You're right, Max," she said. "It's time I turned over a new leaf." She looked very pale, very thin. She began walking up and down the room, her hands in the pockets of her trousers. She looked like a boy in her sailing kit, a boy with the face of a Botticelli angel. "Have you ever thought," she said, "how damned hard it would be for you to make a case against me, in a court of law, I mean, if you wanted to divorce me? Do you realize that you've never had one shred of proof against me from the very first? All your friends, even the servants, believe our marriage to be a success." "What about Frank?" I said. "What about Beatrice?" She threw back her head and laughed. "What sort of a story could Frank tell against mine?" she said. "Don't you know me well enough for that? As for Beatrice, wouldn't it be the easiest thing in the world for her to stand in a witness box as the ordinary jealous woman whose husband once lost his head and made a fool of himself? Oh, no, Max. You'd have a hell of a time trying to prove anything against me." She stood watching me, rocking on her heels, her hands in her pockets and a smile on her face. "Do you realize that I could get Danny as my personal maid to swear anything I asked her to swear in a court of law? And that the rest of the servants, in blind ignorance, would follow her example and swear too? They think we live together at Manderley as husband and wife, don't they? And so does everyone, your friends, all our little world. Well, how are you going to prove that we don't?" She sat down on the edge of the table, swinging her legs, watching me. "Haven't we acted the parts of loving husband and wife rather too well?" she said. I remember watching that foot of hers in its striped sandal, swinging backwards and forwards, and my eyes and brain began to burn in a strange, quick way. "We could make you look very foolish, Danny and I," she said softly. "We could make you look so foolish that no one would believe you, Max. Nobody at all." Still that foot of hers, swinging to and fro, that damned foot in its blue and white striped sandal. Suddenly, she slipped off the table and stood in front of me, smiling still, her hands in her pockets. "If I had a child, Max," she said, "neither you nor anyone in the world could ever prove that it wasn't yours. It would grow up here at Manderley, bearing your name. There would be nothing you could do. And when you died, Manderley would be his. You couldn't prevent it. The property's entailed. You'd like an heir, wouldn't you, for your beloved Manderley? You would enjoy it, wouldn't you? Seeing my son lying in his pram under the chestnut tree, playing leapfrog on the lawn and catching butterflies. It would give you the biggest thrill of your life, wouldn't it, Max? To watch my son grow bigger day by day, and to know that when you died, all this would be his. She waited a minute, rocking on her heels, and then she lit a cigarette and went and stood by the window. She began to laugh. She went on laughing. I thought she'd never stop. God, how funny, she said. How supremely, wonderfully funny. Well, you heard me say I was going to turn over a new leaf, didn't you? Now you know the reason. They'll be happy, won't they? All these smug locals, all your blasted tenants. It's what we've always hoped for, Mrs. de Winter, they'll say. I'll be the perfect mother, Max, like I've been the perfect wife. And none of them will ever guess. None of them will ever know. She turned round and faced me, smiling, one hand in her pocket, the other holding her cigarette. When I killed her, she was smiling still. I fired at her heart. The bullet passed right through. She didn't fall at once. She stood there looking at me. That slow smile on her face. Her eyes wide open.
Maxim's voice had sunk low. So low that it was like a whisper. The hand that I held between my own was cold. I did not look at him. I watched Jasper's sleeping body on the carpet beside me, the little thump of his tail now and then upon the floor.
I'd forgotten,
said Maxim, and his voice was slow now, tired, without expression.
That when you shoot a person, there was so much blood.
There was a hole there on the carpet beneath Jasper's tail. The burnt hole from a cigarette. I wondered how long it had been there. Some people said ash was good for the carpets.
I had to get water from the cove,
said Maxim.
I had to keep going backwards and forwards to the cove for water. Even by the fireplace where she'd not been, there was a stain. It was all round where she lay on the floor. It began to blow, too. There was no catch on the window. The window kept banging backwards and forwards while I knelt there on the floor with that dishcloth and the bucket beside me. I carried her out to the boat. It must have been 11:30 by then, nearly 12. It was quite dark. There was no moon. Then I had to get under way, with the dinghy astern, and beat out of the little harbour against the tide. The wind was with me, but it came in puffs, and I was in the lee there, under the cover of the headland. I remember I got the mainsail jammed halfway up the mast. I hadn't done it, you see, for a long time. I never went out with Rebecca. And I thought of the tide, how swift it ran, and how strong into the little cove. The wind blew down from the headland like a funnel. I got the boat out into the bay. I got her out there beyond the beacon, and I tried to go about to clear the ridge of the rocks. We began to drift sideways closer to the ridge. It was dark, so damn dark I couldn't see anything on that black, slippery deck. Somehow I blundered down into the cabin. I had a spike with me. If I didn't do it now, it would be too late. We were getting so near to the ridge, and in 6 or 7 minutes, drifting like this, we should be out of deep water. I opened the sea cocks. The water began to come in. I drove the spike into the bottom boards. One of the planks split right across. I took the spike out and began to drive in another plank. The water came up over my feet. I left Rebecca lying on the floor. I fastened both the scuttles. I bolted the door. When I came up on deck, I saw we were within 20 yards of the ridge. I threw some of the loose stuff on the deck into the water. There was a lifebuoy, a pair of sweeps, a coil of rope. I climbed into the dinghy. I pulled away and lay back on the paddles and watched. The boat was drifting still. She was sinking too, sinking by the head. The jib was still shaking and cracking like a whip. I thought someone must hear it, someone walking on the cliffs late at night, some fisherman from Kerrith, way beyond me in the bay, whose boat I couldn't see. The boat was smaller, like a black shadow on the water. The mast began to shiver, began to crack. Suddenly she heeled right over, and as she went, the mast broke in two, split right down the centre. The lifebuoy and the sweeps floated away from me on the water. The boat wasn't there anymore. I remember staring at the place where she had been. Then I pulled back to the cove. It started raining.
Maxim waited. He stared in front of him still. Then he looked at me, sitting beside him on the floor.
That's all,
he said.
There's no more to tell.
Rebecca is dead, I said. That's what we've got to remember. Rebecca is dead. She can't speak. She can't bear witness. She can't harm you anymore.
There's her body,
he said.
The diver has seen it. It's lying there on the cabin floor.
If they find out it's Rebecca, you must say the other body was a mistake. You must say that the body in the crypt was a mistake, a ghastly mistake. You must say that when you went to Edgecombe, you were ill. You did not know what you were doing. You were not sure even then. You could not tell. It was a mistake, just a mistake. You will say that, won't you?
Yes.
He said.
Yes.
They can't prove anything against you, I said. Nobody saw you that night. You had gone to bed. They can't prove anything. No one knows but you and I. No one at all. Not even Frank. We are the only two people in the world to know, Maxim. You and I.
Yes.
He said.
Yes.
They will think the boat capsized and sank when she was in the cabin, I said. They will think she went below for a rope for something, and while she was there, the wind came from the headland, and the boat heeled over, and Rebecca was trapped. They'll think that, won't they?
I don't know,
he said.
I don't know.
Suddenly the telephone began ringing in the little room behind the library. Maxim went into the little room and shut the door. I had a sick, expectant feeling at the pit of my stomach. Maxim came back into the room.
It was Colonel Julian. He's just been talking to Searle. He's coming out with us to the boat tomorrow. Searle's told him.
Why Colonel Julian? Why?
He's the magistrate for Kerrith. He has to be present. Inspector Welsh, too.
Why? Why Inspector Welsh?
It's the custom when a body's been found.
Maxim rose early next morning and left without waking me. I spent my morning as busily as I could. At 1:05 I heard the sound of a car in the drive, and then voices in the hall. Maxim came in, and Frank, and Colonel Julian. The Colonel spoke quietly, gravely, like a doctor.
This is a most distressing thing, Mrs. de Winter. I do feel for you and your husband most acutely.
To Maxim, he said.
What makes it so difficult was the fact of your identifying the first body over a year ago.
Frank said quickly.
I think the mistake was very natural under the circumstances. The authorities wrote to Maxim presupposing that the body was hers, and Maxim wasn't well at the time. That's nonsense. I was perfectly well.
Colonel Julian said.
Well, it's no use going into all that now. You've made that first identification to Winter, and now the only thing to do is to admit the error. There seems to be no doubt about it this time. No. I just wish you could be spared the formality and the publicity of an inquest, but I'm afraid that's quite impossible. Naturally. I don't think it'll take very long, but it has to be done. No, what bothers me is the wretched publicity of the affair, so sad and unpleasant for you and your wife.
That evening, when Frith brought in the local paper, there were great headlines right across the top of the page, and an awful blurred photograph of Maxim that must have been at least 15 years old. It was dreadful, seeing it there on the front page, staring at me. The story was in the London papers, too. I thought of all the things they could say if they knew the truth. Not one column, but 5 or 6. Newsboys shouting in the streets, outside the underground stations. The inquest was to be held at Lanyon, the market town 6 miles the other side of Kerrith. We had to park the cars in the big cobbled square by the marketplace. Dr. Phillips' car was there already, and also Colonel Julian's. "I think I shall stay here," I said. "I don't think I'll come in with you after all." They went off together and left me sitting in the car. The minutes went by. I got out of the car, and in spite of myself I found I was coming to the building where the inquest was being held. I saw a policeman watching me curiously from the door.
"Excuse me, madam. Aren't you Mrs. de Winter?"
"Yes." "How long will they be?"
"I'll go and inquire if you like."
He disappeared along the passage. In a moment he came back again.
"Mr. de Winter has just given his evidence. Captain Searle and the diver and Dr. Phillips have already given theirs. There's only one more to speak. Mr. Tabb, the boat builder from Carruth. Perhaps you'd like to hear the remaining evidence. There is a seat just there, inside the door."
"Yes," I said. "Yes, I think I will." I slipped in and sat down just by the door. My heart gave a jump suddenly as I recognized Mrs. Danvers. She was sitting right at the back, and Favell was beside her. Jack Favell, Rebecca's cousin. James Tabb, the boat builder, was standing up now, and the coroner was asking a question.
"Yes, sir. I converted Mrs. de Winter's little boat. She gave me the job of doing her up like a little yacht." "Was the boat in a fit state to put to sea?" "She was." "Has the boat ever been known to capsize before?" "No, sir. She was a stout seaworthy boat and could stand a lot of wind. Mrs. de Winter had sailed her in worse weather than she ever found that night. That's what I've said all along. I can't understand Mrs. de Winter's boat being lost on a night like that." "But surely, if Mrs. de Winter went below for a coat, as is supposed, and a sudden puff of wind was to come down from the headland, it would be enough to capsize the boat."
James Tabb shook his head.
"No, I don't see that it would. I went and looked at the boat yesterday. Captain Searle himself gave me permission. There was nothing wrong with that boat as regards the work I did to her. She was lying on sand, and there wasn't a mark of rock on her. So, what I want to know is this. Who drove the holes in her planking? Rocks didn't do it. There were holes, done with a spike. And that's not all. The seacocks have been turned on, and they're always kept tight closed when you're under way, otherwise the water would flow in. When I examined the boat yesterday, both seacocks were turned full on. It's my opinion, sir, that the boat never capsized at all. She was deliberately scuttled."
Someone in front of me stood up, and they were talking, too. They were all talking. The coroner was asking everybody to be silent.
"Mr. de Winter, you heard the statement from James Tabb, who had the care of Mrs. de Winter's boat. Do you know anything of these holes driven in the planking?" "Nothing whatever." "Can you think of any reason why they should be there?" "No, of course not." "It's the first time you've heard them mentioned?" "Yes, of course it is." "Well, who looked after Mrs. de Winter's boat?" "She looked after it herself." "The boat was moored in a private harbour belonging to Manderley?" "Yes." "Any stranger who tried to tamper with the boat would be seen. There's no access to the harbour by public footpath?" "None at all." "Therefore, we must assume that whoever took the boat out that night drove in the planking and opened the seacocks." "I suppose so." "You have told us already that the door of the cabin was shut, the portholes closed, and your wife's remains were on the floor. This was in your statement, and in Dr. Phillips, and in Captain Searle's?" "Yes." "And now, added to this is the information that a spike was driven through the bottom and the seacocks were open. Does this not strike you, Mr. de Winter, as being very strange?" "Certainly." "You've no suggestion to make?" "No, none at all." "Mr. de Winter, painful as it may be, it's my duty to ask you a very personal question." "Yes." "Were relations between you and the late Mrs. de Winter perfectly happy?"
They had to come, of course. Those black spots in front of my eyes, dancing, flickering, stabbing the hazy air, and it was hot, so hot, with all these people, all these faces, and no open window. The door, from being near me, was farther away than I had thought, and all the time the ground coming up to meet me. And then, out of the queer mist around me, Maxim's voice, clear and strong.
"Will someone take my wife outside? She's going to faint."
I was sitting in a little room, The policeman was there, bending over me, giving me a glass of water, and someone's hand was on my arm. Frank's hand.
Maxim told me to take you back to Manderley. Can you walk as far as the car, or shall I bring it round?
I can walk, but I'd much rather stay. I want to wait for Maxim.
Maxim will be a long time.
Why will they be a long time? What are they going to do?
Well, they may have to go over the evidence again. They won't believe in an accident anymore.
We drove back to Manderley in silence.
Will you be all right now?
Said Frank.
I shall go back to Lanyon. Maxim may want me.
He did not say anything more. He got quickly back into the car again and drove off. I must have fallen asleep in the library because I woke suddenly with a start and heard that first crack of thunder in the air. I sat up. The clock said 5. Robert came into the room.
The car has just driven up to the door now, madam.
Which car?
Mr. de Winter's car, madam.
Is Mr. de Winter driving it himself?
Yes, madam.
I tried to get up. My legs were things of straw. They would not bear me. After a minute, Maxim came into the room. He looked very tired, old. There were lines at the corner of his mouth I had never noticed before.
It's all over.
I waited. I could not move towards him.
Suicide,
he said. Later that evening, when Maxim was resting before dinner, Frith came to me in the library.
Excuse me, madam. There's a gentleman to see Mr. de Winter, madam.
Who is it? I said. Frith looked uncomfortable.
It's a gentleman who used to come here frequently at one time when Mrs. de Winter was alive. A gentleman called Mr. Favell.
I think perhaps I'd better see him, I said.
Very good, madam.
In a few moments, Frith returned and showed Favell into the library. He looked much the same as before, but a little rougher, if possible, a little more untidy.
This business has been a shock to me, you know. A bloody awful shock. Rebecca was my cousin. I was damn fond of her.
Yes, I said. I'm very sorry for you.
I'm going to see justice is done to Rebecca. Suicide, God almighty, that doddering old fool of a coroner. You and I know it wasn't suicide, don't we? Don't we?
The door opened, and Maxim came into the room, with Frank just behind him. Maxim stood quite still, with the door open, staring at Favell.
What the hell are you doing here?
Favell waited a moment, and then he began to smile.
As a matter of fact, Max, old chap, I came to congratulate you on the inquest this afternoon.
Maxim did not move. I saw Frank close the door very quietly.
You realize, don't you, that I can make things damned unpleasant for you if I choose? Not only unpleasant, but shall I say, dangerous.
Still, Maxim did not move. He never took his eyes off Favell.
Oh, yes. In what way can you make things dangerous? I suppose there are no secrets between you and your wife, and from the look of things, Crawley there just makes the happy trio. You all know about Rebecca and me. We were lovers, weren't we? I've never denied it, and I never will. Very well, then. But you never knew I had this note, did you? I kept it, because it was the last thing she ever wrote to me. I'll read it to you.
He took a piece of paper out of his pocket. I recognized that thin, pointed, slanting hand.
I tried to ring you from the flat, but could get no answer. I'm going down to Manders right away. I shall be at the cottage this evening, and if you get this in time, will you get the car and follow me? I'll spend the night at the cottage and leave the door open for you. I've got something to tell you, and I want to see you as soon as possible. Rebecca.
He put the note back in his pocket.
Now, that's not the sort of note you write when you're going to commit suicide, is it? It was waiting for me at my flat when I got back about 4 in the morning. I telephoned the following morning and heard Rebecca had been drowned.
None of us spoke.
Now, Max, I've laid all my cards on the table. Why can't we come to some agreement? If I had a settlement of 2,000 or 3,000 a year for life, I could jog along quite comfortably. And I'd never trouble you again. I swear before God I would not.
Maxim finally replied.
You think you can frighten me, don't you, Favell? Well, you're wrong. I'm not afraid of anything you can do. There's the telephone in the next room. Shall I ring up Colonel Julian and ask him to come over? He's the magistrate. He'll be interested in your story.
Favell stared at him and laughed.
Good bluff, Max, but it won't work. You wouldn't dare ring up old Julian. I've got enough evidence to hang you, old man.
Maxim walked slowly across the room and passed through to the little room beyond. I heard the click of the telephone. I heard Maxim's voice, very cool, very calm. He came back into the room.
Julian is coming right away.
Presently, Colonel Julian arrived, and Frith showed him into the room. Maxim nodded to him.
I think you realize that I haven't brought you out on an evening like this for a social half-hour before dinner. This is Jack Favell, my late wife's first cousin. Go ahead, Favell.
Favell stared at him a moment. He put his hand slowly in the waistcoat pocket and brought out Rebecca's note.
This note was written a few hours before Rebecca was supposed to have set out on that suicide sail. Here it is. I want you to read it and say whether you think a woman who wrote that note had made up her mind to kill herself.
Colonel Julian took a pair of spectacles from a case in his pocket and read the note. Then he handed it back to Favell and said,
No, on the face of it, no, but I don't know what the note refers to. Perhaps you do, or perhaps de Winter does.
Maxim did not say anything. Favell twisted the piece of paper in his fingers.
My cousin made a definite appointment in that note, didn't she? She deliberately asked me to drive down to Manderley that night because she had something to tell me.
He turned his head and looked slowly towards Maxim.
Rebecca never committed suicide. Max de Winter murdered Rebecca, and I'm going to prove it.
Colonel Julian said quietly,
Wait a minute, Mr. Favell. Why didn't you produce that letter in court?
Favell stared at him and laughed.
Why? Because I didn't choose to, that's why. I prefer to come and tackle de Winter personally. I tell you, he killed Rebecca because of me. He knew I was her lover. He was jealous, madly jealous. He knew she was waiting for me at the cottage on the beach, and he went down that night and killed her. Then he put her body in the boat and sank her. Quite a clever story, Favell, in its way, but you have no proof. You can't produce one shred of evidence against de Winter, and you know it. You can't even prove your own story, can you? Can't I?
I saw Favell smile. He came across to the fireplace and rang the bell. I guessed already what was going to happen. Frith answered the bell.
Ask Mrs. Danvers to come here.
Frith glanced at Maxim. Maxim nodded shortly, and Frith left. We all waited, watching the door. Then Mrs. Danvers came into the room. Colonel Julian addressed her.
I want to ask you a question, and the question is this. Were you aware of the relationship between the late Mrs. de Winter and Mr. Favell here?
They were first cousins.
I was not referring to blood relationships, Mrs. Danvers.
I'm afraid I don't understand, sir.
Oh, come off it, Danny. You know damn well what he's driving at. I've told Colonel Julian already, but he doesn't seem to believe me. Rebecca and I had lived together off and on for years, hadn't we? She was in love with me, wasn't she?
To my surprise, Mrs. Danvers considered him for a moment without speaking, and there was something of scorn in the glance she gave him. She was not.
Listen here, you old fool.
She was not in love with you or Mr. de Winter. She was not in love with anyone. She despised all men. She was above all that. Favell flushed angrily.
Listen here, didn't she come down the path through the woods to meet me night after night? Didn't you wait up for her? Didn't she spend the weekends with me in London?
Well, and what if she did? She had a right to amuse herself, hadn't she? Love-making was a game with her, only a game. She told me so. She did it because it made her laugh. It made her laugh, I tell you. She laughed at you like she did at the rest. I've known her come back and sit upstairs in her bed and rock with laughter at the lot of you. There was something horrible in the sudden torrent of words. Something horrible and unexpected. Then Colonel Julian spoke, quietly and softly.
Mrs. Danvers, can you think of any reason, however remote, why Mrs. de Winter should have taken her own life?
Mrs. Danvers shook her head. No. Favell said swiftly.
There, you see?
Colonel Julian directed Favell to produce the note again. Favell shrugged his shoulders. He felt in his pocket for the note and threw it on the floor at Mrs. Danvers' feet. She stooped and picked it up. We watched her lips move as she read the words. Then she shook her head. I don't know what she meant. If there was something important she had to tell Mr. Jack, she would have told me first.
You never saw her that night?
No. I was out.
Then you know nothing of her mind, Mrs. Danvers. Those words, I have something to tell you, do not convey anything to you at all.
No.
Does anybody know how she spent that day in London?
Nobody answered. Maxim shook his head. Favell swore under his breath.
Look here. She left that note at my flat at 3 in the afternoon. The porter saw her.
Mrs. Danvers said, Mrs. de Winter had a hair appointment from 12 until 1:30. I remember that.
So, what was she doing from 1:30 until 3? We ought to verify that,
said Colonel Julian. I've got her engagement diary locked in my room, said Mrs. Danvers slowly. I kept all those things. It's just possible she may have noted down her appointments for that day.
Do you mind us seeing this diary?
Colonel Julian asked Maxim.
Of course not. Why on earth should I?
Mrs. Danvers returned swiftly with the diary. She gave it to Colonel Julian. It seemed to me then that there was something about that particular moment, while he looked at the page of the diary, and we stood waiting, that frightened me more than anything that had happened that evening.
Ah, here it is. Hair at 12, as Mrs. Danvers said. Lunch at the club. And what have we here, though? Baker, 2 o'clock. Who was Baker?
He looked at Maxim. Maxim shook his head. Then at Mrs. Danvers. She knew no one called Baker. I've never heard the name before.
Well, here it is,
said Colonel Julian, handing her the diary.
You can see for yourself. Baker.
Mrs. Danvers had the book in her hands and was turning the leaves. Suddenly she gave an exclamation. There's something here, right at the back among the telephone numbers, Baker, and there's a number, 0488. But there's no exchange, just an M beside it. Favell jeered.
Oh, try every exchange in London. Try Mayfair. Try Museum. Max doesn't care if his telephone bill is £1,000, do you, Max? You want to play for time, and so should I if I were you.
Maxim lighted his first cigarette.
Something had better be done about it. Frank, go through and ask the exchange for those numbers.
Frank went through to the little room beyond. Favell gave a cackle of laughter.
Carry on, Detective Number 1.
After 5 minutes, Frank returned.
Museum 0488 is an address in Bloomsbury. The night porter said there were no residents there at all, but the place is used during the day as a doctor's consulting rooms. Apparently Baker's given up practice and left 6 months ago. But we can get hold of him all right. The porter gave me his address.
It was then that Maxim looked at me. He looked at me for the first time that evening, and in his eyes I read a message of farewell. Then he turned to Frank.
Well done. What's the address? Somewhere near Barnet, north of London,
said Frank, giving him a slip of paper.
But it's not on the telephone. We can't ring him up. We'll have to drive down.
Colonel Julian said,
Satisfactory work, Crawley. Mrs. Danvers, can you throw any light on the matter now?
Mrs. Danvers shook her head. Mrs. de Winter never needed a doctor. Favell said,
The note and that appointment seem to hang together. But what the hell was it all about? That's what I want to know. What was the matter with her?
The truth screamed in their faces, and they did not see. They all stood there, staring at one another, and they did not understand. The next morning, we set out for London. Maxim drove, and I sat beside him. The Colonel sat in the back. Behind us drove Favell in his own car. We came to the suburbs at about 3 o'clock. The drive through London seemed endless, and by the time we had drawn clear again and were out beyond Hampstead, there was a sound in my head like the beating of a drum, and my eyes were burning. Maxim was pale, and there were shadows under his eyes, but he did not say anything. The Colonel drew out a large-scale map from his coat pocket and began directing Maxim to Barnet. It was a postman who pointed out the house in the end. We drew up and got out of the car. Favell strolled up to meet us. We walked up the drive to the front door. A strange, incongruous little party. Colonel Julian rang the bell. It tinkled somewhere in the back premises. There was a long pause. A very young maid opened the door to us. She looked startled at the sight of so many of us.
Dr. Baker,
said Colonel Julian. Yes, sir. Would you come in? And she showed us into the drawing room. We waited there for about 5 minutes. Then the door opened and a man came into the room, looking a little surprised.
Won't you sit down?
He turned to me. I sat down in the nearest chair and waited.
You must think this is a very unorthodox invasion, Dr. Baker, and I apologize very humbly for disturbing you like this. My name is Julian. This is Mr. de Winter, and Mrs. de Winter, and Mr. Favell. You may have seen Mr. de Winter's name in the papers recently.
Oh, yes. Yes, I suppose I have. Some inquest or other, wasn't it? My wife was reading all about it.
Maxim turned to the doctor.
We've driven up to see you today because we found your name and the telephone number of your old consulting rooms in my wife's engagement diary. She seems to have made an appointment with you and kept it at 2 o'clock on the last day she ever spent in London. Could you possibly verify this for us?
Dr. Baker was listening with great interest. But when Maxim had finished, he shook his head.
I'm most awfully sorry, but I think you've made a mistake. I should have remembered the name de Winter. I've never attended a Mrs. de Winter in my life.
Colonel Julian asked.
Could she have come to see you and given a false name?
Why, yes, that's possible. It's rather unusual, of course.
Would you have any records of the visit on your files? I know it's not etiquette to ask, but the circumstances are very unusual. We do feel her appointment with you must have had some bearing on the case, and her subsequent death.
Murder,
said Favell. Dr. Baker raised his eyebrows and looked inquiringly at Maxim.
I had no idea there was any question of that. Of course I understand, and I'll do anything in my power to help you. If you'll excuse me a few minutes, I'll go and look up my files.
Presently, Dr. Baker came back into the room with a large book and a file case in his hands. He carried them over to the table, opened the book and began turning the pages.
The 12th, did you say, at 2 o'clock? Oh.
We none of us moved. We all watched his face.
I saw a Mrs. Danvers on the 12th at 2 o'clock.
She gave a wrong name, of course,
said Maxim.
That was obvious from the first. Do you remember the visit now, Dr. Baker?
Yes. Mrs. Danvers, I remember now.
He read through the files, then replaced them in the case. He glanced at Maxim.
Of course, this is unprofessional, you know. We treat patients as though they were in the confessional. But your wife is dead, and I quite understand the circumstances are exceptional. You want to know if I can suggest any motive why your wife should have taken her life. I think I can. The woman who called herself Mrs. Danvers was very seriously ill. The pain was slight as yet, but the growth was deep-rooted, and in 3 or 4 months' time she would have been under morphia. An operation would have been no earthly use at all. The X-ray photographs showed a certain malformation of the uterus, I remember, which meant she could never have had a child. But that was quite apart. It had nothing to do with the disease.
I remember hearing Colonel Julian speak, saying something about Dr. Baker being very kind to have taken so much trouble.
You've told us all we want to know, and if we could possibly have a copy of the memorandum in your file, it might be very useful.
Of course,
said Dr. Baker.
Of course.
We went and stood by the car. No one said anything for a few minutes. Colonel Julian handed round his cigarette case. Favell looked grey, rather shaken. I noticed his hands were trembling as he held the match.
Shall we get into the car and go?
Said Colonel Julian to Maxim.
We can make our plans as we go along.
Maxim held open the door of the car, and Colonel Julian climbed in. I sat down in my seat in the front. Favell still leant against the car and did not move. He was watching Maxim. He had lost the grey colour now, and the old unpleasant smile was forming on his lips.
It's been a stroke of luck for you, hasn't it, Max? You think you've won, don't you? The law can get you yet.
And so can I. In a different way.
He stepped back onto the pavement, the smile still on his lips. The car slid forward. As we turned the corner, I looked back and saw him standing there watching us, and he waved his hand, and he was laughing. We drove on for a while in silence. Then Colonel Julian spoke.
He can't do anything. That smile and that wave were part of his bluff. They're all alike, those fellows. He hasn't a thread of a case to bring now. Baker's evidence would squash it.
Maxim did not answer. I glanced sideways at his face, but it told me nothing. We drove on through the northern suburbs and came once more to Finchley and Hampstead. Colonel Julian said,
What do you propose doing? I've got a sister living in St. John's Wood and feel inclined to take her unawares and ask for dinner, and then catch the last train from Paddington. Could you throw me out at my sister's?
When we came to the house, Maxim drew up a little way ahead of the gate.
It's impossible to thank you for all you've done today. You know what I feel about it without my telling you. My dear fellow, I've been only too glad. If only we'd known what Baker knew, of course, there'd have been none of this at all. Well, goodbye to you both. Don't get overtired. It's been a long day.
Now that we were alone again, the strain was over. The sensation was one of almost unbearable relief. Maxim did not speak. I felt his hand cover mine. We drove through the traffic, and I saw none of it. Nothing could touch us anymore. We had come through our crisis.
We'll find somewhere on the road we can put up for the night. Then we can get along to Manderley in the morning.
Yes, I said.
I believe that Rebecca lied to me on purpose. The last supreme bluff. She wanted me to kill her. She foresaw the whole thing. That's why she laughed. That's why she stood there laughing when she died.
I did not say anything. We had supper in Soho. At one point, Maxim went to the telephone to call Frank. In 10 minutes, he came back. Well, I said, my own voice sounding far away. How was Frank?
Frank was all right. I told him what had happened. He sounded glad, relieved.
Yes, I said.
Something rather odd, though. He thinks Mrs. Danvers has cleared out. About 10 minutes before I rang up, Frith telephoned to Frank and said there had been a long-distance call from Mrs. Danvers, which he had switched through to her room, and she had answered. This must have been about 6:10. At 6:45, he knocked on the door and found her room empty. Her bedroom, too. They think she's gone.
Isn't it a good thing? She can't do anything. If she's gone, so much the better. It was Favell who telephoned her, of course. Colonel Julian said if there was any attempt at blackmail, we were to tell him. They won't dare do it. They can't. It's too dangerous.
I'm not thinking of blackmail.
What else can they do? It's all over, darling. It's finished. We ought to go down on our knees and thank God that it's finished. Maxim did not answer. He was staring in front of him at nothing. Suddenly he said,
Have you finished? I don't think I want any more. Only coffee. Black, very strong, please, and the bill.
I wondered why we must go so soon. It was comfortable in the restaurant, and there was nothing to take us away. I followed Maxim out of the restaurant, stumbling a little and yawning.
Listen, do you think you could sleep in the car if I wrapped you up with a rug and tucked you down in the back?
Yes. Oh, yes, I suppose so. But you'll be so tired.
No, I shall be all right. I want to get home. Something's wrong, I know it is. I want to get home.
His face was anxious, strange. I climbed into the back of the car, and Maxim got in the front and switched on the engine. I shut my eyes. It seemed as if I dozed for a while. Then I sat up and pushed my hair away from my face. I can't sleep. It's no use.
You've been sleeping. You've slept for hours. It's 2:15. We're 4 miles the other side of Lanyon.
I climbed over and sat beside him, staring in front of me through the windscreen. I put my hand on his knee. The hills rose in front of us, and dipped, and rose again. It was quite dark. The stars had gone. What time did you say it was? I asked.
2:20.
That's funny. It looks almost as though the dawn was breaking over there, beyond those hills. Can't be, though. It's too early.
It's the wrong direction. You're looking west.
I know. It's funny, isn't it? He did not answer, and I went on watching the sky. It seemed to get lighter, even as I stared, like the first red streak of sunrise. Little by little it spread across the sky. It's in winter you see the northern lights, isn't it? I said. Not in summer.
That's not the northern lights. That's Manderley.
I glanced at him and saw his face. I saw his eyes. Maxim, I said. Maxim, what is it? He drove faster, much faster, and topped the hill before us. The road to Manderley lay ahead. There was no moon. The sky above our heads was inky black. But the sky on the horizon was not dark at all. It was shot with crimson, like a splash of blood, and the ashes blew towards us with the salt wind from the sea.